lowest fuel level as possible. So we're on the passenger side rear seat here. Right here underneath, there's a little pull ring that you pull out. And as soon as you do that, the seat can be removed. So take the seat out and set it aside. And now you'll find the access panel for the fuel pumps. Now we're going to turn these small plastic screws. Now you'll see that they'll turn over and make it so that this access panel can be removed. Now this exposes the fuel hat. So inside here we have two electrical connections and then two fuel lines. So we'll start by disconnecting these two electrical connections. Then we'll start the car and that will relieve the fuel pressure. To remove this connector, just push in right here and lift up at the same time. For the second electrical connector, just pinch here and pull up. Now with the pumps disconnected, start the car and this will relieve the fuel pressure. Okay, so to disconnect these fuel lines, be aware that there will still be fuel pressure in here. Even though we've depressurized the system, it'll spray upwards, so get a lot of paper towels and be ready to cover it. And what you're going to do is, there's these two white pieces that you push together, and as you push them together, then you can slide the fuel line off. In the engine compartment, we're going to lift these two tabs to expose the battery. And with a 10mm socket, we're going to take off the negative battery terminal. 10mm seem to be a little bit loose, but if you're careful, you're okay. So disconnect this and set it aside. Now we'll be removing these 6 8mm bolts that go all the way around. There's a little bit of a tar type rubber that they've put on here to help seal it, so just make sure that the socket goes all the way over the head when you're taking it off, and that way you don't strip anything out. So here's what the assembly looks like outside of the car. You have the fuel hat here with the fuel sending level. Tells you how much fuel you have. And then in this bottom compartment is where the pumps are. Now, just because it's really hard to see when it's in the car, this is that tab that we were trying to pull up on. Okay, so you reach down into the tank. This is in the very front. And you pull that tab and it will release it on a sliding track. The main thing is these lines are all bundled like this, so you want to unravel them and then you can slide everything out. Okay, so once you pull that tab up, you can feel the whole assembly slide forward on its track, and now we're going to lift it out all as one piece. So to get the hat part out, you kind of want to unbind the hose basically to untangle it, and that'll give you more slack. Just make sure that the float comes out with it. Just be very careful there. Okay, so once the hat part is out, so you basically just unkinked all the hose here, then you can lift the rest of the system out. basically the only thing that's getting hung up are these hoses. Okay, you can videotape this part, I guess. Okay, so they just get the hoses out, lift this part somewhat vertical. Right here on the bottom you can see the tab that we had to push to get it off of the track. Just be as careful as you can. Okay, so now that we have our box here, we're just going to start undoing some of these lines by pinching. Okay, so just pinch and release on each of these. You have a 90-degree one there, and then these other two ones. I need to twist them a little bit to access them. Then just pinch. And release. Once again, twist it if you have to line it up so you can get your fingers on it, then pinch these and just pull it out. Okay. Okay, now it may not make a difference, but I'm just going to be extra careful here. This one came off the right hand side. I'm just going to put a zip tie in here temporarily just to mark it so we know where it came from. We'll later cut that zip tie. But we know that this right one came from here, the left one came from here, and the 90-degree one came from that left side. This is where the two pumps are coming from, but we don't know if one's more of a secondary or a primary pump or anything like that. Now to work these tabs, it's a little tricky. We're going to be pushing in with the needle nose pair of pliers to compress them, and at the same time we're going to be lifting up on this tab with another pick. So once you do that, let's see if we can get this. There you go. Okay. So there, once this tab in the middle is lifted up, we're going to push the other tabs forward. One more time. Let's try that again. Okay, so once again, pinch and lift this tab. There we go, got it. And as you see, it comes out. So we're going to do the same thing here on this bigger one. We're going to compress those two while lifting this tab. There we go. Oh. Try that again. Compress those two, lift the tab, pop it out. Separate it once you get the chance. Okay, so we're going around the whole assembly this way. There. So here these are coming out a little more. As you can see, these have been pinched in, that part has been lifted up, and we're pulling it out. So that's how we're getting these out. So we're just carefully working our way around the pump, removing these clips. And there's going to be one on the front here that we're going to have to remove this part here. There we go. And now that that's kind of out of the way, we can finally access this one back here. Okay, so we just went around the sides we pinched in and lifted up on each tab, and that's how we got it out. We went all the way around, and now these have all come out. So we have our lower part of the cage here. And let's see, let's go ahead and tip this over here. And let's remove this little nub here. Okay, so we just pulled this one straight out here, and so now we have the bottom part of our basket. And then here's the top part, and this contains our fuel pumps. Very careful here. And these are the socks, as they call them. They're kind of like little filters. And so now we're just going to be removing the pumps from here. So here's the fuel pump here. We're just going to be disconnecting the electrical connector. So to do that, we're just going to push down in between it with a flathead screwdriver and then pulling out on the clip.
If you look down in here in this little slot, you could put a screwdriver if it's small enough down in there and push against it to leverage the switch out safely.
Very good. So now to remove this casing that the fuel pump's inside, there's 4 of these tabs. So you're going to be sticking screwdrivers basically 1, 2, and then on the bottom side, you can see this, 3 and 4. Okay, so then by separating these all at the same time, then we can slide the whole assembly off. So here we are just separating this with 4 different screwdrivers. So we're getting these 4 tabs all pulled up at the same time, then pushing on the top up here of the pump to kind of push it out. Okay, so by lifting up and pushing out, that's how we're separating this to get it out of the basket. Okay, so as you can see, this is how the pump comes out. You're just releasing these 4 tabs here. You're spreading them all out and pulling the pump away from it. So as you pull the pump out, you want to pay attention up inside here. You'll see this black O-ring. There's a black O-ring that's up in here, and that needs to be removed and the new one put on to the top of the pump. Pull the O-ring out with a screwdriver. To remove the pump from the sock assembly, just put a screwdriver in and very gently pry it away. So then as you do that, it'll come off of the pump. So now we're just going to basically slide the new pump back into this existing sock.
Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to pull this little blue piece off. It's just a protectant cap. Remove that. And then we'll take this piece, which seems to be ambidextrous, and you could put it on either way. We'll slide that right back on where that cap was.
Now slide on the new spacer from the previous pump, and then take your new supplied O-ring. This is a very important part, and make sure that it goes on top of the exit of the pump. So this is where the pump is actually flowing the fuel to the engine. There is some supplied grease that you can put on there if you want, but this is how it should look with a nice seal here with this O-ring and the spacer. And then put some of the supplied grease on this O-ring so that it'll slide in and not get bound up when you're putting it back in. Okay, now we'll just reattach it back into the sock. There you go.
We need to pull this blue piece off. There we go. Alright, so we're going to put it straight in. Pretty obvious how it
Make
sits.
sure that all these tabs and everything are the same as they just were, that you didn't lose any pieces, and then just
should just slide right in. And I don't think it clicks or anything, it just, as long as it's on there nice and firm like that, there shouldn't be any space between this ring and the pump itself.
So as you press this on, you'll see this very small nub in the back, and that's kind of your indicator whether the pump is fully seated or not. Then just look at it on the sides and just make sure that you have a nice tight seal here. This is on the fuel side that's coming in as fuel goes into the sock and then into the pump. So it should be good if it's on there snug. Now with the sock installed, again we're just going to slide these back into their little cages. And something important to mention though is if you get pumps that are too big, they won't fit back inside these cages. So there is a good link that I'll try to include in this video that shows how to modify this basket here. You have to cut it so that the pumps will fit. But anyway, we're just going to install this how they came out. So now we're sliding these back in, and as you can see, the tip of the pump, you know, it only really goes one way to straddle that. But once you clip it in, all those 4 posts will clip back together, and you'll be set. And we'll just do it on the other side. Okay, so once again, just make sure that all 4 clips engage, and then we'll just plug the pumps back together. Okay, so the pumps have been slid back into their cages. We've reconnected it here where they came out. And then on the back side, all 4 tabs have all been engaged. So we're just going to put this assembly back together now. So now we're just lowering the pumps and everything back into the bottom half of that basket. We'll be aligning all these back up.
Yeah, we want to check the other side too and make sure that they're lined up.
Okay, so we're just reconnecting all these into place, just the opposite way that we took them out. Make sure all of them are in. Okay, all of our clips have been replaced. All these tabs, that's what we're talking about. So then we'll come back around here and reattach this gray piece.
And then also note on the back side, I just barely plugged this blue clip in. It just plugs onto this tube at the very end.
Okay. So the new pumps are now in the new system, and we're ready to drop this back into the tank. Now we just reconnect our 90-degree one that had the green clip here. Then we have our other 2 hoses. Once again, we took the one on the right and we put a zip tie around it, so we knew which one it was. Let's see. Okay, so this one that was on the right, we're putting back on the right. Okay. The one that was on the left, we're just putting back on the left-hand side. There we go. So, want to make sure that those are on good and tight. They appear to be on just fine. Okay. That look good to you too? Seems like it. Okay, so now we're gonna push this back down in to the tank. Careful with the hat while we're at it. There is some twisting that has to go on, so just be careful on the sharp edge as well of the tank itself. Just kind of hook it back up the way that it slid out, so just kind of find the track down in there.
Alright, so just barely installed this fuel pump assembly. A trick to getting it to go in straight is by looking into the tank ahead of time. You'll see 2 different tracks, one more towards this side, one more towards this side, and you'll want to start by taking the assembly and bringing it forward, digging the back end down towards the bottom of the tank. Then once you get that, you'll feel it catch on the track, and you don't want to start pushing it back too hard unless it's on the track. And once it's on, it goes right back in. It seems like it's securely in there.
Yeah, so we're getting a good feel for it. It's definitely back into its home, per se. It's just how it was when we were first getting it out. So start with the float and get it down in there, and then just kind of twist the rest of the assembly and these wires. Just make sure that they all kind of go down in there in a nice fashion where they're not getting hung up on anything, where they're not twisted. There you are. Just line everything up back the way that it was. Okay.
Now we're going to insert the screws.
Okay, two things. First of all, you will get a little bit of gunk here because of the material, the tar material used to seal it. Inevitably, you'll get some fuel on that, so you can take your time cleaning it before you put the seat back. If you do have fuel down inside any of these connectors, go ahead and take some compressed air and a rag to catch it when it comes flying up, and then just kind of blow them out. So then you're good to plug those connectors back in. Right now we'll go ahead and reconnect these lines. Make sure that everything's clean. Everything looks good here and here. Connector itself is a little dirty, but that one's done. Okay, we're all hooked up there. Take a minute first to clean this hat up and then we'll plug those back in. Okay, so now we're just kind of replacing the hat here. We're going to plug these electrical connectors back in the way that they came out. Let's see here. Okay. Now, put this cover back here, and then just with our screwdriver, we'll just twist these back into their spot. One's always a little stubborn, it seems. Twist it by hand if you can't get it with a screwdriver. Okay, just replace the seat by sliding it back up and in. Make sure you have the seat belt holder back out. That's back how it was. Now just reconnect the battery terminal. Replace the cover. Alright, so now it's time to test it and see if it worked.